This is Frank Radis. This guy's pretty cool. You're kind of like bicontinental, aren't you? You mostly live in London.
Yeah.
And you're a television producer, mostly
producer, director, news, advertising. Worked on feature films.
And you brought Lloyd Kaufman here.
Brought Lloyd Kaufman here. Those of you who don't know Lloyd Kaufman, he's probably the wackiest filmmaker out there right now. Been making movies for 40 years. Appeals to millennials. Weird. He's the most prolific independent filmmaker in America, and would have been here to speak had he known earlier, but he left early, so I'm in his place.
Awesome. And man, like Toxic Avenger and Romeo and Juliet,
40 years ago.
Sergeant Kabuki Man,
yeah.
in NYPD.
Yeah.
Great stuff. If you don't know this stuff,
Poultrygeist, Revenge of the Chicken.
Poultrygeist.
Yeah.
That's upsetting.
Yeah.
It's a very upsetting film.
Well, did you see the movie yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Oh man.
But I know that students were raving about it.
Were they? That's great, because it was really bloody and gory.
Well, that's what do you expect from Troma?
You know, and full of sex and nudity.
And that's exactly what you expect when you walk into a Troma film.
So he takes a position, you know? Which is really important in movie making. Not in journalism, but in movie making.
I do want to, but that's interesting. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, I guess I would call it, I don't know if it's a conflation or kind of blending of the lines of media today. Cinema and television, or, I mean, what's the difference anymore? It's crazy. And then you bring news into it, and you bring, how many of you guys watch the evening news at 6:30 on television, on network television?
Not a surprise.
I do, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I feel like, damn it, that's what my dad did. And I'm going to get the news with the rest of the country at the same time. And I know that's BS, but there's something about it that's very calming. I feel like I trick myself into thinking I'm consuming and getting this information at the same time as everyone else. It gives me a sense of community.
No, I think that's the reason. It's this sort of cumulative effect. It's the heritage of it. It's what we did when we were younger, that sort of thing. For those of us who are not younger, it really hasn't lost its importance. If you think about the numbers across the country, they are still pulling in 30 million people a week watching these 6:30 newscasts. Granted, the audience is probably 60 plus, but if you
not
really
quite there, but working on it.
Well, but you know what? I mean, the reality of that demographic is they're the ones with the money.
Sure.
And they're still watching television, and they're watching it on a big screen. There was a conversation that you guys were having yesterday that I walked away from. I don't think it was really clearly resolved, which was about how many of you are consuming your content on your phones and on your laptops, and actually probably not even laptops. I'm getting a sense that laptops are actually sort of on the way out. It's about tablets, it's about large phones like the iPhone 6 or the 6S. You were talking about, you know, sort of leaving the area of the large screen. You don't have to leave the area of the large screen just because you watch television or film or content on your phone, because you can stream that content on your phone to your large screen, especially if your phone is a 4K camera. Somebody was talking about, oh, do we need to shoot this stuff differently for the small screen than we would for the large screen? I believe you don't. I believe that you shoot it the way it needs to be shot with all of the detail on the content, because a 4K camera on a telephone blown up to a television set is as good as a cinematic experience. So that's sort of the next step, I think, of the way that content will be created and then distributed.
I want to come back to that 1 second. How many of you guys watched The Daily Show? Okay, so you got nobody else in here watched the Daily Show when Jon Stewart was on it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So most of you, a lot of you guys. So you guys, that's where you got your news from. No, seriously.
Yes.
Okay. You know, it's funny. So that's that blending of entertainment and journalism that started to bring up.
Yeah.
And did you guys all watch it at when it came on 11:30 at night on Comedy Central, or did you stream it?
Stream.
Right there.
So I'll tell you a funny story, and then we'll get around to that. So in about 1984, I was a producer at CNN, and I had this brilliant idea to make a comedy news show. And I got this guy named Richard Belzer, who you may know as a star of Law and Order SVU. Before that, he was a comedian, a stand-up comedian, and a brilliant one, because his genre was he would come after getting extremely stoned in the green room. He would grab the newspaper and he would open it up and he would stand on stage and he would read news stories and make fun of them. And it was brilliant. Topical comedy based on the news. So I said, wow, we can do a TV show like that. So I asked him, who would you co-host a show like that with? Because clearly, you know, you're a liberal. We need a conservative, so I can have that point counterpoint. He said P.J. O'Rourke. I don't know. Wow. Do you know who he is? So P.J. O'Rourke is just one of the funniest writers in the world, and he's conservative.
He started as a liberal.
He did, and he switched over. But I guess it's a good question. I'm not exactly sure what the switch over was because
Carter.
Might have been, but we can talk about that in
Sorry,
another conversation. I have lots of opinions about that. I was in Iran in '79. I'll tell you about my thoughts on Carter.
Looking for
it. So I put together this TV show. We shot it at Caroline's Comedy Club, which is the biggest comedy club in New York, and I got my friend Rick Derringer, who was lead guitar player in Cyndi Lauper's traveling band, to be the live band. And so we had all these great guests. We had Morton Downey Jr., who was probably the first guy that ever did trash TV ever. We had Lou Dobbs, who was just beginning his career as becoming the preeminent financial television correspondent. And we had Pat Schroeder, who had actually run for president that year, as guests. And then we opened up, we had Mitch come on, and we opened it up to the audience. The audience asked them questions. The band played us through. Richard and PJ were really funny. It was really great. We crammed into there. We shot the thing in an hour and 15 minutes, cut it down to 48 minutes, handed it to Ted Turner, and he went, that's kind of funny, but we don't do comedy. Boom, nobody ever saw it. That was maybe 5 years before Comedy Central ever had a daily show. And it was heartbreaking because I thought we had something that was really good. It's really funny because I stayed in touch with Jeff Zucker, who's the CEO of CNN, who called me a few weeks ago and said, do you still have a copy of that comedy show you did? And I said, why? Are you interested in doing it? Well, we do own it. So there's the real story there is own your negatives. So
I'm not sure they even know what that means. Like
own your own content. If you own your content, you have the ability to make a back end deal, which is where real money is going to be made in digital, in sort of the digital world. Digital world is not going to put out, $100 million for you to make a piece of content. Yeah. $100 million for you to make a piece of content like a feature film and then distribute it digitally so that the millions of people can see it, because there's no way to monetize it yet at the level that you can. Now we get back to why television it's still the more powerful medium because more money can be made with it.
Well, we're making content right now. Olivia has a phone on us.
Well, this is Periscope, and so last year at South by Southwest, a company called Meerkat came out with this basically it's a live streaming app. So the difference, however, between simple live streaming, which has been around a long time, you could have done that with Ustream for years. You've been able to go and live stream anything you want on your phone or on your laptop using the cameras on the device and have your own television show. You could always do that. You could do it with a phone as long as you brought in the Ustream app to use it. What you couldn't do was have two-way communication with the people that are viewing. So now there's a social experience going on. They're watching us. If I were actually, I imagine while you're, what's your name?
Olivia.
Olivia. So I imagine while you're holding the phone there, which is shooting us, people are watching.
Yes.
They're coming into the stream and they're saying things at the bottom, probably. What normally you would do, and we can't do because I don't have the phone and I'm not doing the shooting, is somebody would come on and say something to me and I would respond directly to that. So now there's a two-way communication. They're not seeing me, or I'm not seeing them, I'm just seeing what they're saying. And they're putting in hearts. Hearts are likes. So if you touch the screen, every time you touch the screen, a pile of hearts will come up on the right-hand side. That means they like what they see.
We get any hearts yet?
We've got some comments. I haven't seen any hearts yet.
And so that automatically creates a situation where you live stream something and you get comments. Now, this is the newest generation of this. I believe that there is an yet untapped potential for this to become a huge marketing tool and for you to become your own television star. There are already stars on Periscope. There's this girl named Amanda Oleander. She's an artist in California. She periscopes 3 or 4 times a day. She has 10 million followers on a brand new format. Do you guys know who PewDiePie is?
Yes.
Okay, PewDiePie, if you're familiar with him, you know, he's this guy in the upper left-hand corner of somebody playing a video game talking about it. He has 40 million subscribers. 40 million. Any television network in the world would be proud to have 40 million anything. And so, as you can see now, there's streaming media and the digital media are creating and generating gigantic numbers for you to get your message out there. So that's one part of the equation. It's an important part of the equation. It's not generating that much money yet because even PewDiePie with his 40 million is averaging about $5 million. It's a good amount of money, but it's really chump change in the real world of media. About $5 million a year for maybe a 28-year-old kid who's made his own television show based on watching other people play games. That's good. That's not real money. There's another side to this whole streaming thing as an informational tool. During the Arab Spring, recently, the only way the content was delivered to anyone outside that part of the Middle East was through Twitter. That made it an important and powerful tool of journalism. Probably one of the reasons why you may now start seeing local and network people out there shooting their stories on iPhones with selfie sticks and a separate microphone so that they can get high quality audio on a 4K image and then feed it over telephone lines back to the studio or back to the distribution facility to be distributed at a wider rate. So now you're using to challenge the television students to try and come up with some new name for television. And it has been now, what, about a year. I haven't gotten a single word back yet. I can be honest with you, I haven't come up with that name. I don't know what it is. But there is something going on in there called transmedia, which is the combination of generated content, film, television, shot on cameras, shot on Alexas, shot on Red cameras, shot on VHS, whatever, that is then incorporated into a digital sphere, an app, a microsite, that allows you to have an engagement with that content that could be used as a promotional tool. So, for example, a good example of this is, do you all know Game of Thrones? Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen the Game of Thrones Viewer's Guide? Okay, so there's a thing on the internet called the Game of Thrones Viewer's Guide, completely that tells you what's going on with Game of Thrones. Brings up little pieces of clips, it explains the clips, it explains the characters.
It's got a cool map, too.
Cool map, interactive, very, very, very complicated show made into something that you can now follow. And the interesting thing about this is that you don't get any spoilers. You can't go beyond it if you haven't seen beyond it. It's very interesting. So it's incorporating imagery, content. There's even some behind-the-scenes stuff in there, material that you wouldn't get by watching the show, which is shot originally for it. Yet another combination of material that is shot as content, utilized for another reason. And here's just a term I like: second screen. Hate that. Hate the idea of second screen. Whatever screen you're looking at is your primary screen. And I would venture to say that in somewhere around 5 years, there will only be one screen, whatever it is, and it may not even be a screen. It may be a hologram. It may be something that's, here, my dream, chip. But that's just me. So when I'm walking around, I'm going, hey, shoot that. I don't have to touch anything, ends up in it. But that's another story.
You guys know we offer a class at SCAD in this stuff. It's called Film 366, Production for Alternative Distribution. I teach it. Just saying.
Look, honestly, alternative distribution
It's an old title.
But it's 27 channels that are addition to the average person watches 18 channels. 18 channels out of an entire sphere of television available on cable. Of those 18 channels, 5 of them are watched most of all. Those are new statistics that just came out from the Pew Research Center, which I think maybe yesterday. So there's new numbers out there. You should take a look at those numbers. It gives you a really good idea about how people consume content. And what we're talking about, and I hate to say, those of us who are artists in the room, and I at one time considered myself an artist, I didn't want to be bothered by people telling me how to cut my stuff or how to do the sound design or what the story was going to be. And I would say all the time, and I still mean this, it's all about the story. It's all about the story. But what does that matter if nobody watches it? And so the power right now belongs to the distributors. And I think that that we're looking at a world where you make your own you are your own distribution companies. Distributors don't matter unless you turn that dial or press the button, or I guess nobody turns a dial anymore. Or you go.
You're right.
I have this great Samsung TV where I go channel 5, TV goes to channel 5, or Netflix, TV goes to Netflix. It's just incredible. Someday that little device in my hand is not going to be in my hand. It's going to be on the TV. I'm just going to tell it. It's so Star Trek, I can't believe it. I'm going to say channel 5 in German, and it's going to translate the television in German for me while I'm watching it, whether it's a movie or a newscast or a television show or whatever.
So let's bring that back around. What does that mean for content producers? What you guys are making? I mean, you guys came to film school. I mean, most of you guys are film majors, or maybe some dramatic writing majors in here. But you guys came to film school with this dream, this idea of telling stories. What does it mean for these guys? The days of, I mean, there are only so many tentpole movies that can be made and distributed in theaters.
I think it means a lot for these guys. You all have the bull by the horns. Anything you make, you have an opportunity to distribute. The difference will be that it's the number of people who will be able to have access to your content, and if the content's good, people will watch it, and then due to social media, because social media will become if it isn't already, a daily part of everybody's life. They will share it with other people. Here's and that's good. So keep making content, make the best content you can. It will get distributed, it will get looked at, eventually it will get monetized. But here's the issue with that. So you make this content, and you eventually, say you put it on a YouTube channel or something like that, starts to do well, and it gets stolen. And not only does it get stolen as your content that you made, suppose the content that you created is an idea that is really good, and that idea becomes a television show or a feature film because of your content. That's the problem, and that's the issue that you have to face. How do you fix that? I actually have some ideas around that I've spoken to the Producers Guild about, and it's got to do with net neutrality, and net neutrality has issues of its own. But if net neutrality doesn't happen, then everyone's going to be run by the major conglomerates. It's going to be owned by Comcast, and it's going to be owned by Liberty Media, and it's they're going to run the ball game. So anything that goes on their platforms belongs to them. So I think there's the challenge for you. Don't stop making great content. Make the great content. Do it on whatever platform you want to do it on. Distribute it any way you want to distribute it. But you've got to figure out a way, and it's going to be this generation that figures it out. How does that stuff get safely, securely monetized, and how does the money come back to you? That's because in the end, unless you're Picasso and really don't care until you die and your paintings are worth a lot of money. Unless you're that kind of an artist, you want to do this and you want to make a living at it eventually. It's I personally started out wanting to make a living at it. I didn't start out wanting to be an artist. I eventually got to be good enough where I thought, hey, I'm really great. Nobody's going to mess with me because I'm so good. And quite honestly, that doesn't really work either. Because somebody slaps you in the face that's better and says, no, you're not, get out of here. But I think that's the big challenge. Try and figure out how to monetize it and how to secure it. And I think the answer to that right now is some method of watermarking.
Interesting.
So look at the music business. Napster came up, and the record company went, oh God, we got to stop this. Let's shut this thing down as quickly as possible. Because we got to sell our records or we got to sell our CDs, and these guys are just giving away our stuff. This is terrible. Let's shut it down. So they shut it down instead of co-opting it. And then everybody started putting digital rights management on every CD that you could buy. So you'd go out and you buy a CD, you couldn't make a copy of it because it would all come out as numbers and gibberish until people started creating programs like Handbrake so that you could go in and break those files, and then you'd start sharing them again. So people like you figured out a way to get it done. That will always happen, especially online, because real smart people can always figure out a way to get around something.
Do you remember the Dead Kennedys released a cassette tape? Because the industry was yelling about cassette tapes were a horrible idea because people could record their own music. And so they left an entire B-side of the cassette tape blank so you could record your own music on the B-side of their album that they released. So I thought that was kind of brilliant.
I'll get to that in a second, because I actually have a really good story about that, something like that. So what happened was Apple came in, created iTunes, took over the entire industry, and now the artists and the musicians are being paid pennies for their music, where in the past they would have been paid dollars. ASCAP and BMI, which are the licensing organizations that every writer and musician joins, because when they write and record music, people pay for it by putting money into that pot. So if it's a radio station, or if it's an online area, or if it's a television network, or if it's a mall out on Abacore Road or whatever, they put money into this pot, and then when the music is paid, somebody actually logs in that we just played this song by the Dead Kennedys. The Dead Kennedys work as an ASCAP writer. ASCAP pays the writers, ASCAP pays the producers, ASCAP pays the artists. So that is not set up like that in video content yet. There is no sort of licensing agreement and arrangement for that. My solution to this is that digital rights management is not just a tool to protect, it's a tool to help pay. So that way, everyone is, if it's digitally rights managed, watermarked, that thing gets played. Some sequence of events occurs where the pot of money that those people that utilize that stuff gets put into actually gets back out to the artists and the writers and all of that. I think we're way far away from that, because right now you'll never see Disney talking to Sony talking to one of us.
So it's like an ASCAP BMI situation for video content online?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Can you imagine YouTube being distributed like that?
I don't see it coming, but I think that's a solution, and it's worth. Those are the kinds of things you need to be thinking about, because aside from making your movies and your television shows and your content, you need to be thinking about what am I going to get out of this besides the satisfaction of making it. Look, if the satisfaction of making it is all you want, go with God. But if the satisfaction of making it and getting paid for it is something that you want, you're going to have to work.
How many of you guys put your content online? That's what I thought. Everybody. And
I do it.
What's the return on that for you? No,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't have to necessarily be monetary. What's the return on it for you? What do you get out of doing that? Exposure. What else? Feedback.
Ego boost.
Ego boost. Yeah, that's good.
All that's good, but do you know that some of your content has pre-roll on it? Whether you wanted it there or not, which means somebody else is getting paid for your content?
Yeah. It's got a.
I don't think I'd like that. There's a
Biscuit commercial in front of it or something.
And that brings up an interesting point. I wrote a blog about this not too long ago. If you watch a pre-roll, you know that you have to watch the first 5 seconds until you can skip the pre-roll and then go into the content. So I think that there's so much to be done within the first 5 seconds of pre-roll that there needs to be a way. People need to be looking at how do we take advantage of the first 5, and if you can get a message across in the first 5 seconds, whether it's a comedic message or a dramatic message or whatever, often people will stay and watch the rest of it before they get into the other content. I think that first 5 is a real opportunity for you guys, but that's another story. I'm going to go back to what you were talking about, the Dead Kennedys.
Yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of, there's a guy named David Scott Meerman, who's a brilliant futurist, who wrote a book called Everything I Know About Marketing I Learned from the Grateful Dead.
Right on.
So,
I saw him in Chicago.
he would have loved talking to you. See, I mean, anybody who watches the Grateful Dead, this guy will talk to. But here's the thing. The Grateful Dead did one thing that nobody else did. And they allowed everyone to record their concerts. They were a live band. If you ever listen to a Grateful Dead record, please don't kill me. They're really awful.
I've seen it like 50 times.
Live, they are fantastic. But I'm telling you, they are not the greatest. They were not the greatest musicians in the world. Their music always sounded like a jam.
That's okay.
It's just be true lovers. But they allowed everyone to come and record it and share it. Now, at the time, when they were doing it, they were recording it on audio tape, and people were then making copies of those audio tapes and giving them out. They did not care about it. There was no issue with it. And in fact, they even allowed people to come up to the board and plug into the board. So you could get a full high-quality output of the board on your content and then share it. Very, very, very early version of what social media was. That helped to expand their brand. It was called reach and frequency, the two most important words in marketing today, probably ever, forever, and into the future is reach and frequency. So what do I mean by reach and frequency? So frequency is it just gets played over and over and over and over and over again because and you might get sick of it, but I'm telling you, just because you're sick of it doesn't mean that somebody in Omaha is sick of it because they will just have just started hearing it. So that's frequency. Reach is a result of frequency. It's like here's how many people are now getting that message. So you combine reach with frequency, and now all of a sudden your content is being seen, heard, listened to, and distributed to, and then engaged with by a larger, wider audience. That's the key to marketing. It's the key to advertising, and I believe it's the key to distribution of content. How do you then turn that into money? That's what your job is going to do.
This is a conversation, guys. I want to invite you guys to ask questions, or if you have any questions for these guys, which I think you brought some really great ones, feel free to engage in conversation here. Is this stuff that you guys even think of?
I think that's interesting that you talk about how Napster was taken down, but then we have certain things like Spotify now, which is so popular, and I think a lot of people here use it. And now the way that they're trying to hook people is saying like, oh, you get a premium membership for $10 a month, or if you're a student, it might be at a discounted rate. And now you're starting to see iTunes follow suit. Do you think that the companies that are trying to make you buy music and movies will maybe understand that this generation is more adamant about getting free stuff? Because I feel like we're the generation of getting free stuff.
I think that the companies don't see it. I think it's inherent and offers me back music that I might not be listening to, but it's similar to the music that I listen to. And hey, here's 3 or 4 songs or a bunch of songs that you haven't heard, but you should listen to. And that's how I discover new music. So I use Spotify, and I pay for it because, I can. But honestly, I hate paying for it. So I hate paying for apps. I mean, if I see an app for $1.99, I will go and search until my heart is dry, trying to find the free version of that before I'll pay for it. I just am against doing it because I think the internet is free, and it should be. Look at played on vinyl was a better sound than what a CD was, and than what a file is now. So Tidal is trying to do something about that. But I think that paying for music the way it should be heard is also absurd. So I agree with you on that one.
I want to extend an invitation to we have some gaps over here. We're kind of packed up over there on that end.
Fill in the
You guys
gaps,
want to
folks.
fill in the gaps and make sure we have a path for folks to get into the hospitality suite as they're coming downstairs. We have Krispy Kreme donuts over here, coffee from the Sentient Bean. Hashtag Krispy Kreme on the Twitter.
I was wondering where the heck the Krispy Kremes were because they were sponsored. Yes.
Oh, well, I was just going to ask. So I've heard of some filmmakers having success with having their films viewable for free.
Phone, spatially, there might be a difference in the way that you're going to shoot it,
Yeah,
because you might have more close-ups, so you can see it. You don't want as many long, wide shots. So there's some spatial.
Well, I said, as I go back to, I actually, if you make something for the phone, you make it for the phone. So you do use a lot of close-ups. You make sure that the fonts are big enough if you've got a lower third, all of that. You make it for the phone, but if you make it for content's sake, because you can take that phone and you can use a Chromecast or a Fire Stick or a Roku and take that phone imagery and send it via Wi-Fi directly to a large screen. If you have shot it just for the phone and now you've sent it over to your large screen, it's not going to be what you want. Because what you want is a more fulsome view of things. That's why 4K is so important. Because you can expand an image on 4K without losing content degradation. There's no issue with it. And now, 6K is the next big thing. I was at CES last year. I saw a 12K TV. I thought I was standing next to a person. It was incredible. No editing house is ready to cut that stuff yet. But if you shoot on 4K or 8K, if you're shooting on a Red or an Alexa or something that has that kind of quality, you're shooting with prime lenses, you can go into the edit room and say, you know what, that guy that's 300 yards back there that I can see him moving around, I'd really like to see a close-up of that. You can zoom into that in your edit room, and it'll look just fine.
This year, SCAD, the film department, made the leap. Everything is at least 4K in our department now. That includes our freshman level intro classes, where we're shooting on Blackmagic with prime lenses at 4K for this very reason.
And, well, that is an entirely new, different mindset of making film. Utilization of that technology. It's a new way of doing it. I actually know a guy that shot a commercial last week, and he shot it on 4K specifically because he didn't know where he was shooting a green screen shoot, and he didn't know where the graphics were going to lay or how they were going to interact with the actor. He was very prepared, but he wanted to be ready to do anything. So he chose to shoot on 4K and shot the guy on green screen. He centered him up, had him do all of the things that he would do with interacting with a graphic that might run over here, or looking down and going like this and moving over to the side, interacting with graphics that weren't there. So that once he was finished with it, he could zoom in on the guy, he could pull out on the guy, he could go left, he could go right, he could place him anywhere he wanted without losing the quality of what he shot on green screen. And then he could put in the graphics anywhere he wanted at any place he wanted. And that you kind of could do that before, but if you zoomed in on it, it looked like crap. Now with 4K, it doesn't, and with 6K, and with 8K, and with 12K, it won't matter at all anymore.
My late colleague B.J. Sears taught editing here, and he predicted this. He called it the editor as auteur. Our day will come.
I was at a PGA meeting in London last week, and I was talking to the guy who directs Marco Polo, the series, and he asked me what I did, and I said, well, or how I started, and I said I started out as a film editor, and he goes, "You're the second director," and so think about that. I think that the power and the importance of you as directors and your relationship with your editor couldn't be more important today than it ever has been. Editor's always been really critical. You know that. If you're an editor, if you're a writer, if you're a producer, you know that the power and the importance of the editor. But now the editor can do more graphic and digital manipulation on that image. Every ride that you go on in a theme park is a manipulated video experience. So that's just another way to create, it's 3D manipulation of video content. So, there's so many more ways that what it is that you guys are learning how to do, to utilize, to distribute, to experience today than there were, I guarantee, today than there were 5 years ago, than 10 years ago. Brand new ways of utilizing your own content. That's one of them. That's a very interesting thing to discuss and talk about. You can talk about that for a day. But that's a good point. Yes, absolutely.
So, talking about content and digital marketing, what about a viral video where your cat sings versus a film that I just saw, Youth? I mean, they're totally different on the opposite ends, and what do you have on that?
Well, I've made my share of cat videos, I hate to admit it. And I'm an avid cat video follower, but I would never pay to watch somebody's cat video. So
You haven't seen my cat videos, man.
you know what? I'm going to go look for them now. I'm going to go look for them, but I won't pay for it.
That's cool. You might want to after you see them. Just saying.
But it's funny because people used to say that the internet is nothing more than tubes filled with cats, and it helped get people to it to start utilizing the internet as a tool of distribution. And so, hey, wait a minute, I saw the cat, but wow, wait a minute, there's this really cool thing over here I've never seen before. Let me go look at that. It's kind of the way it's just such a great way of looking at the homepage on YouTube, so that it comes up and it's got a lot of these different images with a very cleverly written piece of metadata, which, by the way, is way more important than you think. It's not just a matter of here's my content. It's that 2 lines of copy that is under your content that explains to people why they ought to watch it. That is critically important. It's very much the elevator pitch to the guy that you want to make your movie for. It's very much the headline in the New York Post, headless body found in topless bar. It's the thing that, you know, that makes you want to go and watch it and experience it. The line of copy sometimes is more important to get you into the tent than you will ever imagine.
So work on those log lines.
I don't know if I answered your question. Kind of? Okay, if you want to ask me more about it later, I'm around. They're not letting me go back to my room. Yeah.
Hi. Well, lately I've been researching about horror films and horror, about horror and basically. But I lately came up with a YouTube video that's about like sleep paralysis, and then I was surprised to find out that it was like for $5. So I was surprised that YouTube does that now. And what do you think about that? Because it's basically a niche market.
First of all,
I don't know how to
great
get
genre.
Yeah.
Did you see yesterday's movie, the Lloyd Kaufman film?
I heard about it. Circle?
No, not Circle. The Return to Nukem High Volume 2. Okay, love that movie. It was something. You should watch some of Lloyd's movies. I'm going to make a guess right now. That was probably paid for by some sleep drug. There's a lot of that going around right now, where you will see something that appears to be standalone content. There's no advertising built into it, but there is a distinct reason for it being, and that is that the Pfizer has paid for it. Once again, demand. I'm just guessing on that one, but often that's how that happens. And lately, certainly within the last 5 years, a lot of marketing goes out there that has no graphic on it. So, an ad for Supergirl doesn't necessarily have to say that it's on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock on CBS. It's just a cool video of Supergirl. People start talking about it. They eventually go and find it. It's like that sleep video. They eventually go out and they research it and they find out, oh look, Pfizer makes this drug that does this, and you buy it. And it's a perceptive kind of sales tool. It's not really sort of this old-fashioned product integration kind of thing. It's way more subtle, and I think that may be what that is. But I also think that you're going to see a lot more of that as time goes on. So now you're creative. It can be as creative as it wants to be, but it can also be a sales tool. So that's saying, hey, you know what? I can make movies as an advertisement.
Branded content.
It's more than branded content, but it is branded content, but it's not branded. It's content for a brand that's not branded, but still sells the brand. That, I think, is a new way of things getting done. When I was at NBC, I did a couple of things where I didn't put date and time on internet ads. So we had this series called To Catch a Predator. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Okay, so To Catch a Predator, we decided that we were going to make a full 24-hour digital-only marketing plan for it, just to see how it did. So just to see if we could get people to go over and watch it on television, but only market it online. So, and that was video online, and that was videos and stills online, and blog ads, which are content ads that also have video in it that don't look like ads. They look like content. So I had this image of a girl that we shot. She was showing her belly, and she had her, you can see the top of her panties, and she was pulling up her top. And it said, "Do you think I'm sexy? Click yes here or no here." And it didn't matter what you clicked on the image, it took you right to the Catch a Predator page, which then said, "Watch it tonight on Dateline at 9." And we had the highest click-through rate of any blog ad ever made to date because of that. And the ratings for that night's Dateline shot through the roof. It was crazy.
Do you remember that stunt that you were at Southside this past year?
Yeah.
That Ex Machina played with Tinder?
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, there's the tools that are out there for you to be able to do this kind of transmedia marketing are astounding. But even if you're talking about Snapchat and all of those that ilk, if you took a look at a bar graph of the usage of those tools and Tinder and any of those sort of, I don't want to call them secondary digital environments and engagements, they're down in the bottom here. This is, again, the new Pew report. They're down in the bottom here. I will post it after this meeting. I'll post this report, so if you put me, you go to me on Twitter, it'll be there after the meeting. But way up here is Netflix. So I'm not sure what that says, but way up here is Netflix. Yeah.
To kind of piggyback on that, is I use Vimeo to post my content, and I love the fact that Vimeo, like Netflix, is giving a lot of freedom to the creators. So they're keeping the hands of the content to the creator. Do you see a downside to that, where eventually that might become where they have a lot more power in terms of the content?
I hope not. I think it's a great thing, first of all, and I hope that they don't do that. I don't think that they will, because that may be naive, and I've spent my life being naive and getting slapped around for it, but I've still managed to survive. I like what they do, and I hope that they don't do that.
And I see it all the time with even major features. So.
You know, in New York, there are a number of YouTube and Google studios that you can go to and use for free to make your content. And I believe that they're going to start, and I think they do that in LA too, and I believe that they're going to start literally fully blown studios. Go in and make your content free. Just make sure that you're ready, and good director is ready, goes in, gets it done. Good director doesn't necessarily, those of you who shoot documentaries won't agree with this at all, but a good director goes in and knows what shot A is and what shot B is and how the two shots go together before they get into the edit room. Documentary filmmaker shoots a whole lot of stuff and then hopes that it all comes together. And you have an idea, but often when you're making a documentary, the story changes and you have to float with it. But a good director of something that is well thought out, that's what they want in those theaters and those studios, because they want people to come in, know what they want, and get out. If you ever watched any documentaries on Alfred Hitchcock, every single frame of an Alfred Hitchcock movie was written on a 3x5 card, or whatever they called them back in the 40s, on a board. Everything. And it was storyboarded, and it was content listed, and it had the type under it for the spoken lines or the description of the shots. Absolutely every single shot before he shot it. He would have a 10-second scene, he would have 300 cards for it. This is how, you don't need that anymore because you can put it on your phone, but you could actually shoot your own storyboard with your friends. There's a lot of different ways to do it that he was unable to do back then. But be prepared if you use one of those two studios, because you'll waste your time and then they'll kick you out and won't do that.
Is Liam McKendrick in here? Just checking. All right.
Yeah.
It seems like now is the time to make deals with distribution deals with streaming services, because it almost takes the desire of piracy out of the equation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, piracy is never going to go away. There is absolutely no secrecy or security on the internet. That's not the reason to do it, because someone will always figure out a way to pirate it. Always. I just don't see that not happening. On the other hand, the idea of going and making a deal with some kind of distribution company is a good idea, but it's not that easy. A distribution company has to be as protective of the material that you give it as you do of that material. So getting to a well-known distribution company is not a matter of, hey, I got this really great piece of content, you need to see this, and if you like it, you can distribute it. That is not how it works. They want to get it from an agent and that they have dealt with. So I'm now talking about the distribution companies at the level of the cable channels or the higher end networks and that sort of thing, or even film distribution, or even film distribution like Sony Classics or Focus Features or something like that. You don't want to go in there cold with them. You want to go through somebody that has had the experience of getting it to them. There's your protection. Sure.
So recently, there's this classic SCAD that a couple of the writers are taking, which is narrative online content. It focuses on webisodes, short things like that. And recently, we've seen this sort of shift in people looking for content, where they're coming to these short, very inclusive things like HBO just picked up the Awkward Black Woman webisode sort of thing, and they'll be turning that into something larger. What do you think about the viability of these short little things for, you know?
I think they're great. I think there's huge viability. I think the mistake, you know, you can take a look at Michelle Phan, for example. Extreme success in the short form content arena. And then, like every other thing that happens in our world, the television networks go, wow, she should be on the network. And then she's on the network, and you know, it's so where is the strength there? It's in that short form. Short form is really good. Short form gets people interested. Short form gives you guys an opportunity to do stuff that will get reach and frequency. Short form is an important part of content distribution, the formula of content distribution right now. I think short form is great. That's why there are awards at this festival or at the Oscars or at the Emmys for short form content, whether it's short form animation or short form original content or even short form documentary type stuff. And think about the really cool vines that there's this guy who does these brilliant, I can't even remember his name, just these brilliant vines, these 6-second videos where he, you know, it's like he's standing next to the Eiffel Tower and it's like about a mile behind him, but actually it's using forced perspective. It's about 2 inches in front of him, he picks it up and it walks away. Just in 6 seconds, he tells a story. It has a beginning and a middle and an end. That's what a story is. And in that 6 seconds, the guy gets millions and millions of views. That and anybody that wants to utilize his stuff now, which is the advertising industry trying to use it, is now paying him money, large sums of money, because really advertising is where the money is, paying him large sums of money to utilize him and his technique for advertising. We're going to start seeing these. So that's a way that the short form videos become bigger and better. Advertising gets them and uses them. But now, they're paying him. So if you did them, they'd be paying you. Because they're good. In the end, whatever it is, has to be good.
Thank you.
So that 5-minute thing, it might be working for you. Just putting that out there.
You know, and I used to be a producer director at ABC News Nightline, and back in the beginning of Nightline in 1979, the hostages were released. The show became something other than the coverage of the hostages in Iran. It became a regular television show at 11:30 at night on ABC News. But it was not the one show on ABC News that got a lot of money. It just didn't get the resources because nobody wanted to work from Good Morning America all the way through until 11:30 at night until they were finished at 1 o'clock in the morning. Nobody wanted to do that. So I had a story I wanted to do about the mafia in Chicago. And I went to Ted Koppel, the executive producer of the show, and I said, hey, I want to go do this story. It's really good. I've got this writer from the Chicago Tribune who's lived inside the mafia in Chicago. It's really a great idea. So I want to go shoot it. So what correspondent do I get to take with me? And they went, well, you don't get one. And I went, well, how am I supposed to tell the story? I don't get a correspondent. Well, you figure it out. And it's going to be on the air on Thursday. And it was like, I went, okay. So I went, I sat down, and I interviewed this guy for about an hour and a half. And then I went back, and I took his interview, and I cut it up into little sound bites. And anytime he made a statement that was, as I said before, I would say, no, say that again, but make it a statement so that I could use his words as a track. And then I would go back and shoot and or find video that I needed, very, very documentary style, to put this little thing together and make about a 1.5, 2-minute piece, which then aired on Nightline, which really scared the correspondents because it worked so well. They wondered, oh my God. Well, and so I said, what's the secret to that? And I said, the secret is that's that little part of the documentary that lives and stands alone by itself. That's all that is. The guy's name was Art Patak. It became known as a Patak on Nightline. And it got really big because you would then, by the time I left Nightline 5 or 6 years later, I was doing pieces with 10 and 15 interviews in them, and the pieces ran only 9 or 10 minutes. So there's a real place for that kind of stuff, whether it's a piece in somebody else's documentary, a standalone piece that lives on the internet, or something that you created just because you want to create something from yourself. There's always a way in our business, there's always a way to get something.
Cool. Any questions for you guys? What do you think about this? How are you responding? Are you guys like, whoa, far out?
Is it appropriate to what you guys
I
are
think it's
doing and thinking?
incredibly appropriate. It's right on. I mean, so, like, you know, saying so long are the days where you had a, you know, you could go get a studio deal and from your short film and away you go. There's so much content out there. Somebody's got to make it, and preferably someone should make it well.
Yeah.
Why not you guys?
Yeah.
You know, not all of you are going to go out and be feature film directors for the studios. You might do it on your own, or you might find a different way of getting your work out there. That's the exciting part of what Frank's talking about here.
One of the things that changed in my business was the idea of a predator. When the predators became important, what happened was jobs that were held by 4 people ended up becoming jobs that were held by 1 people.
You guys know what a predator is? A producer editor?
So
Yeah.
when I started out as a film editor, I had an assistant editor, and I had, you know, we had the people that did the processing, and then we had audio guy, and we had this large group that created something. And then we moved over into tape. We got a little bit smaller, and then as we moved forward, the guys that were there would be a writer out in the field with a producer and a correspondent. So now there's 3 people with a camera crew that included a cameraman, a sound man, and a grill. So now you got 6 people out in the field. When they brought it in to edit it, there would be 3 or 4 other people that supported that group of people. That is not the way it's done. It's done with 1 person. 1 person goes out, writes, produces, directs, shoots, brings it back, edits it, sound designs it, walks it down actually doesn't even walk it down the hall, puts it into a server, and as somebody presses a button, then it goes on the air. That's the way things are done in television today. There's styles of that going on in filmmaking today as well. Learn all the craft. I believe that you don't make quantum leaps in your career as a filmmaker or as a television producer, director, writer, whatever it is. You learn how to do everything in stages. You learn how to walk up the stairs. You learn how to climb the ladder step by step by step, so that the person behind you knows that they respect and trust that you know what it is that you're doing. You've done their job, you get it. Not that you go out of college and boom, you're a producer. That's the worst thing that could ever happen to you in your career. Don't go and think that you're entitled because you went to a great school like SCAD and learned everything there is to learn to automatically become some superstar at some ad agency or television network. Learn all the jobs. You will be so much better off for it than you'll ever know. That's my best advice to you.
Cool. You guys
I thought there would be more questions. Maybe either I'm completely like, oh, what is this guy?
No,
You were talking about the man a lot, and do you think, like, with all this independent producing, there'll ever be a day where, like, it's just the artists in control, or will there always be someone trying to cash in on it?
I think, look, Sundance, for example, was an example of here's the place where the artists will have their home.
Yeah.
And then there was the Sundance Festival, and then there were the sponsorships, and it became something entirely different. And so then people moved over, and they tried to do something a little different. I think that there will always be those places. I don't know that they will always, when they become successful, continue to just be those little artistic enclaves. It's not like the 50s when the Beat Generation had their coffee shops where they could go into and take their content into. It's not even like the 60s where the Grateful Dead could let people share their content. There will always be places like that, but there may be, but there will always be the influence of the man to try and figure out how to make money out of it. That will never go away. I'm not saying that you can't figure out how to avoid it. I think that, for all the best possible intentions, some of these video places like Daily Motion, for example, was a place where you could go and put video, share content, You can't do that with Daily Motion anymore. Daily Motion was just bought up by by the man. You know, it gets successful. People see it. They want to own a part of it. And what is ownership? It's monetization. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's terrible. I wouldn't be living in a house in England with a house in France if I hadn't monetized the work that I've done. You know, so to me, it's okay. But I'm also not an artist anymore. You want to be an artist, you need to think differently about it. I am not going to be the guy to say, don't be an artist, go out and make something that's going to make you money. Without art, every form of monetized content includes some kind of good art. That's what makes that monetized content.
I want to introduce a friend. This is Leah McKendrick. She's an actress, and she's in a short film here in the historical shorts called. She's in a short film called The Girl in the Green Dress, which played yesterday in the historical shorts. Did anybody see that? Yeah. Awesome. And Leah, I know that you were about to split out of town and kind of.
No, go ahead.
Very similar. But I wanted to invite you to kind of talk to our students a little bit about your experience working in short form.
Sure.
We've been talking to Frank this morning about some of the kind of changing distribution formats and platforms and what it's like to work in short film format.
Yeah.
So what's your experience like? What's your history with working in short film?
Well, I'm predominantly an actress, but I wrote and produced the film that's here. And that's what I sort of do. I have a small production company in LA, and it was created to create work for myself as an actor. So are there actors in the room? Or is it mostly filmmakers? A little bit of acting. So I feel like the beauty of short films is you don't need the budget of a feature, and you can get it seen. Some people don't want to commit to a 2-hour film. They want to see you, they want to see your work. But they're sort of like, oh, God, I don't have the time. Everybody's getting all these suits are getting so many submissions and films, and a short film can travel, can go so many places. It can go online, it can go viral, it can go to festivals like Savannah that are so prestigious, and people like you will come and see it. And you can send a link and be like, this is what I did, this is how many festivals I've been to, this is what I've won. Check me out and see if you feel what I do.
So it's a calling card to some degree.
Exactly.
Now, after the calling card thing, I mean, you kind of run through the festival gamut. What then? Have you thought about how you're going to get this film out there to tell your story, to get the story seen, get more eyes on it? Have you thought about online distribution or other methods of like with iTunes or whatnot?
Sure. A big one is I really recommend to a lot of people all the time. A web series can do huge things these days. I did a web series. I did it because I was in the music industry. I got a record deal. The label folded. Everybody said, you act, you sing, you dance, go be in Glee. And nobody would get me in for Glee. They were like, who? At that point, Gwyneth Paltrow was going to be doing Glee. I mean, it was like the who's who was getting in and nobody else. And I was just struggling, and I thought, they're not letting me in. I'm going to make my own damn Glee, and I'm going to get it out there and prove to them that I belong on Glee. So I created this web series, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I just thought, okay, I don't have a lot of money. I have houses that I can shoot in, and my school, I went to Chapman University, they'll let me shoot there, and I have a lot of girls I know that can act and sing and dance, so I guess I'll just do sororities at war. So that was sort of the concept that I came up with, and I got hit songs, and we got producers to reproduce them, girls I could sing. And I made this web series just thinking this is going to be my calling card, right? I mean, it sort of blew up, and MTV was calling, and agencies and managers were calling, and Glee was all of a sudden letting me in for an audition. So I feel like for that, because a web series is a model that can be sold, and because it can be a pitch for a larger TV show, serialized something that goes on as opposed to a short, which can be pitched as a feature or a web series or a series or whatever. I always recommend web series because if you want to be a TV writer, if you want to be in TV, it can show that you have a mind that can see beyond one storyline. You can continue that. So
what was the name of your web series?
Destroy the Alpha Gammas.
Destroy the Alpha Gammas. And how long was each episode?
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
7 to 9 minutes, and there were 7 episodes.
There were 7 episodes. And did you shoot them all at once?
We shot them all at
once. Unroll
once.
them like all at the same time?
And I think that's why I always tell students and I tell everybody, if you build it, they will come. If you just sort of stick and you're like, I'm going to make this thing, I don't know how, all of a sudden you'll start hearing, oh, that sounds cool. You know that I have a friend that's in a sorority that she might be interested. And all of a sudden we're shooting at UCLA, we have cranes, and I showed up to set and there were like 50 people, and I was like, we don't have money for all these people. Like, how are we feeding? It was like, I didn't even understand how it was happening. The people just showed up. They wanted to work and wanted to help and wanted to be extras, wanted to be PAs, and it just turned into this huge thing. So I feel like you just kind of got to go for it. And what was the question?
No, that's good. Did you build your own website for it? Did you put it on YouTube or Vimeo? How did that work?
All right, here's the stuff you're not gonna like. So we literally did a press release every week for probably 4 months. I didn't know how to write a press release. I looked that shit up on Google. Like, I literally had no idea what I was doing. Like, I modeled it after like famous press releases. But every time we went, and we did every festival. We were nominated for streaming. I won a Webby. We were just literally everywhere. And so I always had something to say. Even if it wasn't like super notable, I would come out like twisted. I'd be like, yeah, we just did the hugest web festival in LA. Nobody had to know that it was like at the Radisson Hotel by LAX. It was super ghetto. It was in like hotel rooms and nobody was there except for me and my boyfriend. Like, nobody had to know that, but like, I had something to say. So like press outlets that didn't even respond to me for months, all of a sudden were like, wow, this little crappy web series is all of a sudden kind of getting some heat. So we had its own Twitter, we had its own Instagram, we had its own website, we had its own Tumblr, we had its own Facebook. We had the lead guy in it that I had met at an audition. I sang with him at an audition. We were auditioning for Rent. I said, you're the lead of my series. And he was like, what was your name again? And I got very lucky, was on Glee. And I didn't know that until I was like, I'm going to add you on Facebook. And he's like, I got weird privacy settings, like little fans. And I'm like, what do you have fans for? I'm Glee. So that we were able to kind of plug into that fan following. John Robert Hall from Glee, John Robert Hall. So you're tweeting at all of these Glee fans. Now we're thinking, what else? Lauren, this girl who played Lauren, she's on a TV show called The 100 on the CW. So at the time, she had just gotten off Days of Our Lives. So now we're like, Days of Our Lives fans, Days of Our Lives fans. We have her. So you kind of think, like, what angles can I use? Now we're like sororities. Go to every sorority, tweet at every sorority at UCLA. We're shooting at UCLA. It was constant. And I think that that's the reality is, like, you can be the most epic, creative, and make something amazing, but if you don't give it the time to really reach the people and reach the audience.
That's the key, reach and frequency.
It's total consistency, yes.
Yeah. And tenacity too, because you had to be tenacious in order to get it done.
Sure.
And and you got it done. The idea of doing all of the episodes at once and then distributing them weekly,
one by week,
with those. I mean, that's a plan. That's a really smart plan.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you joined this conversation perfectly because the things that we're talking about in the way that
rocky the transition.
It's cool.
Okay, good.
It's the same stuff. It's that she's made a success of all the things that I've been talking about, but I haven't done. She's done.
I mean, it's funny because I don't even feel super qualified to be here talking to you guys, but I think that what it is, has come down to for me, and honestly, nobody would give me the time of day after I left the music industry because they are very different industries. People think, oh, you're a singer and actor, you're everything, you're in the same. No, I was in New York City. I lost my agent because I had said I'm going to New York to record my album from LA, and everybody was like, you're kind of used goods, like you've been out of school for a few years, you haven't been acting in a couple of years because you've been singing. And it's just too competitive to get out of line and then to expect your spot to still be sitting there. It's just not how it works.
This was the man, right? The man was telling you this.
Yes, the man is telling me this. This is what the man is telling me, right? So then
damn the man.
Right?
And he was wrong.
He was wrong because I think, but you do have to give yourself that edge because there's just too many talented people, and I've seen so many filmmakers be like, yeah, I wrote this script, my cousin knows Spielberg's brother, and he's going to get it to him, $5 million. I think I'm going to do it for $5 million, and it's like, okay,
he's driving a taxi on La Brea right now.
Right, exactly. But it's like, you know what, why don't you just make something with what you have, with who you know, with what the idea that you have right now, today. Because then you have something.
There you're right.
And somebody will see your genius in this. I mean, I believe that. I really do think that the first step is just going out there and effing doing it with no money. I'm like such a big believer in it because that's what I've done. I started, I mean, I was like, you know, could barely pay my rent and was making music videos and making shorts just because I thought nobody's gonna hire me because I have nothing to show except for like what I did in college, and it's too competitive now. And so now, you know, at this
So
point,
your
it's
series
gotten
is your
easier.
calling. Your series
It
not
was
just
for
your
a long time, yeah. For, you know, now it's been a couple years and things have gotten easier for me. I mean, honestly, and people, I just did a movie. It's so
unless
true.
all they do is, well, now they spend up, in America, you spend up to 8 hours a day ingesting content. In Europe, it's a little less. I guess we have more to do. But that means you're out there looking, or you're sitting there watching something that you actually meant to go and watch. If you mean to go and watch something, then you've made
Really, really great discussion today. And I really want to thank Frank and Leah for coming here and sharing your stories with us. Tomorrow morning we'll do it again, 8:30. We'll have Krispy Kreme, hashtag Krispy Kreme and Cynthia Bean Coffee, and we're going to be talking about producing.
slide it down.